I'm going to give a quick intro, and then I'm going to tell you sort of today's agenda. And while we're waiting, actually, our second panelist is stuck on a New York City subway. So welcome to life in New York. He will arrive at some point. We're going to wing it in the meantime. So I'm Sarah Holloway. I'm on the faculty at the School of International and Public Affairs, which is Columbia's School of Public Policy. I'm an alum of the same school. I've been teaching there for 13 years. I teach nonprofit management and finance. I teach social entrepreneurship, and I teach a new course called Design for Social Innovation, where we work with clients on big global challenges through design thinking and human-centered design. My background, I'm not an academic. My background's in the nonprofit sector. I've helped start 6 nonprofits, all focused on K-12 education and equity, 3 in what's called ed tech. And through my teaching of social entrepreneurship, I encounter lots of bright new ideas and ventures, and probably the biggest challenge, other than being a startup, which has lots of chicken egg challenges, is scale. And so today's panel is going to talk about scale. So the agenda is I'm going to ask each of the panelists, one of whom is here, to do sort of a 5-minute intro on their personal story as well as their startup story. And then I'm going to ask questions about scaling and how they raise funding and how they manage people. And then the last 15 minutes we're going to leave for Q&A. There's still people coming in. And I'm going to sit down now.
Very popular.
I don't think it's me that they're here for. Thank you. Thank you. I have fans in the audience. Okay, so here, and I take notes, and then I usually ignore them. So, but I do need to read these bios. Andrew Hermalyn is president of global partnerships at 2U, which is an education technology company that partners with universities to offer online degree programs. Andrew has been at the company since he was hired as an intern 11 years ago. And 2U is now a public company. So Andrew, maybe tell us a little bit about how you got here and a little bit about 2U so we have context.
Great. Thanks, and good to see everyone this morning. So I'll start with I'm a very unique person in that when I was 9 years old, I wanted to be a CEO. I knew I wanted to be a CEO. So I started writing letters to CEOs of the biggest companies I can think of, asking for a signed business card. And over my teenage years, got to meet well over 500 or so CEOs all over different industries, and to learn about themselves and their leadership styles. And in some ways, actually, that's how I ended up here. Through my letter writing, 2U is all I know professionally. I was an undergrad at Lehigh University when we started the company, so it was my summer going into junior year when we started. My parents would have killed me if I dropped out of school, so I went back for junior and senior year as a full-time student, but was also working at 2U full-time on our earliest partnerships with the University of Southern California and Georgetown. So I worked junior and senior year full-time for the company, graduated on a Sunday. On Monday, I was back in the office, and then fast forward now 12 years in at this point. We went public in March of 2014, so going from venture-backed startup to hyper growth to public company, and being able to see that those stages has been just incredible, professionally and personally on many levels. Today, 2U, we have about 4,000 employees across 4 continents. We work with 70 university partners. My specific responsibility is I'm focused on our growth, on our relationship management teams with both our university partners as well as our enterprise corporate clients. And I'm ultimately responsible for ensuring that we are delivering in all the ways we say we will for our universities.
Awesome. So I will not wait for Michael. I will just jump in. So one question I ask, and I stole this from somebody else to break the ice, is sort of tell us one thing we should know about you which is not in your bio, other than the business card story, which maybe that's not, the writing the CEO story is not in your bio, but something else.
So I'm a big fan of wiffle ball. It happens to be the only sport I am very good at, and so I started a wiffle ball league in my town growing up, wrote a letter to the wiffle ball company hoping to get free stuff, and was sent a letter from their attorney with a cease and desist because I wasn't allowed to use their name or logo in any print material without permission, and that was at 11 years old.
That is awesome. That's an awesome story. So I know a little bit about 2U, and I know you work with universities across the country, and your growth, even though you're 12 years old, has been pretty rapid. And just interested in hearing a little bit about the early days. Also, I assume there were lots of skeptics at the beginning, because I know universities tend to be very snobby about you need to be here and with the faculty. And so talk a little bit about both the startup days, but also sort of how you convinced people that this was a good idea.
Sure. So going back in 2008, 2U was founded with a very simple sort of vision. It was a theory that great universities could be great online in the digital era while maintaining quality and focus and student outcomes. And back in 2008, still today, there's a lot of preconceived notions of poor quality education online. So you think of online and you immediately associate that with DeVry, Phoenix, and others. We've come a long way in a decade, but there are still those negative connotations towards online. The theory at the beginning was finding great universities with an institutional will, with an entrepreneurial spirit, who were willing to take risk and really move in this sort of digital era, while not substituting what they care most deeply about, what's most important to them, which is their teaching, their research, faculty, the academic rigor and integrity, and allow a company like 2U to do all the things that they would tell you they're historically really bad at. Whether that be technology or marketing or even things that are incredibly important today, like privacy and accessibility. And so, I think in the early days, it was finding those people. I'm so glad you're here, Michael.
Yay, Michael!
How you doing?
Good. Yeah, good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Hi,
So
Michael.
sorry.
Are you done? You're almost done.
Yeah, so it was about finding the right people. We managed to find a great leader at University of Southern California who was sort of lean in, wanted to take the charge with us to start.
So I know I get very stressed out when I'm late, so I can imagine. So I'm going to quickly introduce you, and then we'd love 5 minutes, sort of your personal story, but also the story of your company. So just a quick intro. This is Michael Martin. He's co-founder and CEO of Rapid SOS, an emergency tech company transforming emergency response and the U.S. 911 system. Michael is a leading voice on public safety, security, and tech innovation, and his company, just a few years old, is now powering 90% of data to 911, which is unbelievable, supporting 150 million emergencies a year and some 1,000 a day. So I'm in awe. It's just incredible growth and an incredible idea. So how did this all happen?
Well, sorry again that I'm late, and my mic. All right, hopefully you can hear me now. Delays on 2 New York subways of the 3 I had to do getting here, embarrassing. But great to meet everyone, and look forward to saying hi afterwards. Good news is that Sarah's way more accomplished than both of us, and Andrew's way more interesting and accomplished than me, so you didn't miss much from me being late. But I'm a farm kid from Indiana, thus the naivete around the New York City subway system, I suppose, and moved here to work in venture capital after college. Had my actually lived on the other side of kind of 114th Street, and had my welcome to New York mugging experience. Hello. Okay. So that was kind of my first experience needing to call 911. And if any of you have ever done it, it's kind of challenging in the middle of an assault to get out your phone, right? Dial a number, describe your address, ask your assailant, how severe would you describe the beating is right now, right? So the irony is that one of the only places left in the world where you have to make a phone call is the one moment when it is most challenging to do that, right? So every day across the United States, you have 650,000 Americans that are calling 911. Globally, you have about 2 billion emergencies a year that are going through this 1960s analog voice-based system. So there's all sorts of consequences. The FCC estimates there's over 10,000 fatalities a year, 28 a day, when people call 911 and they don't know their address. So even if you knew you're at Lerner Hall here, like, do you know how to describe exactly what room you're in if someone had a heart attack here, right? So there's so many challenges with that. So so this was one that kind of literally hit me in the face back in December of 2012, and so we founded Rapid SOS. I went to grad school and did my MBA. I was joking on the way in. I was a policy school dropout, unfortunately, but was lucky to meet my co-founder, Nick Horlick, who was doing his PhD in nuclear engineering of all things at the time at MIT. And so today we're about 100 people based in Midtown. We've raised about $90 million. And we support major customers like Apple, Google, Uber, et cetera. And we do manage, as was mentioned, about 400,000 emergencies a day across the United States.
Can you explain exactly how it works? Well, two questions. One, how come 911 never fixed this? I mean, you can hire people to build things, right? So how come that never happened? How come the private sector had to step in? And two, how does it actually work? So.
Yeah, so the 911 system was developed in the 1960s, and it's a local system. So there's very little to no federal oversight, often no state oversight. So it's basically every police chief in America in the 1960s stood up their own system. So the result is there's not one system. There's roughly 25,000 different 911 software systems across the United States. So like, for example, the state of Massachusetts, where I did grad school, is in the range of, I think it's 252 different 911 centers that are running in the range of 600 or so different systems. So it's a major fragmented challenge. So what we did is the other challenge is it's hard to really describe like how intense this job is. Right, like for a 911 telecommunicator. The first 911 call I ever listened in on was in rural Massachusetts. It was a mom who called after her son had hung himself in the closet. And I lasted about 15 seconds on that call, and I actually walked outside, took off my headset. That 911 telecommunicator didn't have that luxury. So she stayed on the phone for the next 9 minutes, figured out the location, got an ambulance there, and then she went on to work the rest of her 12-hour shift for $36,000 a year. So this is not an environment where you can launch, learn, iterate like in a normal startup manner. We had to figure out how we could push data and content through these existing legacy systems. So we spent 6.5 years working with a lot of the big software vendors in the space. We have in the range of 100 different partners there. A lot of these are big defense contractors like Airbus or Raytheon that are running these fairly complicated systems and partnered to kind of get that done. But today, we do cover, you can think of it as almost like previously in a 911 was a copper phone line, and what we've put in place is like a fiber optic cable conceptually, and all the content. And then we spent a lot of time, we studied 12.5 million 911 calls, a lot of them here in New York, analyzed every single question the 911 telecommunicator would ask, figured out what data would be interesting there. So, for example, we're starting to do stuff now where we can detect heart attacks before they or as they're occurring, so you don't have to call. We can immediately get an ambulance to you. Obviously, if there's like a building fire, right, you shouldn't have to call. The building should call for you. So looked at how do you get the right data to the right place at the right time.
Well, and you only have 100 employees, and and that's amazing. So I want to jump back to Andrew for a second. So you started to talk about you got sort of your first school on board, and that was a milestone, I assume, because knowing universities, if you say, hey, MIT's on this, Columbia might say, oh, maybe we should think about it. But if you have nobody on, or a school no one's ever heard of, that's probably an uphill battle. So was that sort of the turning point, was getting that first one to sign up, or how did that look?
Yeah, it was, but I think what you learn in this business, it's just as much about the people as it is the university. So it's, yes, the brand, the reputation, the ranking, all of that's important, but what's actually most important is you're finding the right leaders, the right faculty, the right dean, the right provost, the right president who have, again, that entrepreneurial spirit. We sign contracts with universities that are no shorter than 10 years. And that's a long-term strategic relationship and commitment. And so you have to like each other. And you have to trust each other. And so what we found at USC was a dean of their School of Education, Dean Karen Gallagher, who actually happens to be dean still today. So she's been with us for almost a decade. And it was about her mission more than anything that aligned us together. Her mission at the time was educating students globally.
And you said the word service. I think what's interesting about both your businesses, so when I support startups and ideas, I always divide between sort of products and services. Particularly when you think about scale, it's easier to scale a product than it is a service, and often social ventures are service related. It sounds like you're both platforms and your services, and it looks like you're customizing as well. How do you balance that sort of need to serve and stay lean and be able to reach the numbers you're reaching? Maybe Michael could start.
Yep. So I mean, we started out as a product company. Actually, we originally thought we were going to do a direct-to-consumer app, and that just like you press a button for Uber, you'd press a button for the ambulance. We learned that we knew nothing about reaching the consumer, so that was a dismal failure. That included me literally going on the Kickstarter campaign and walking through the dining halls at Harvard University and handing students $1, asking them to please give it back to me on Kickstarter so that my Kickstarter wasn't a total failure. and even then, we still didn't make it. And so my limited student life savings went into supporting my own Kickstarter. It was really embarrassing. I think what we've learned as we pivoted after that was we really are a mission-critical service provider that's entirely technology-enabled. So of the 100 people, most of our team is engineering. But it's a 24/7 mission-critical operation. So as we talked previously, about 95% of the data into 911 flows through our infrastructure. And we have to have all the kind of uptime and supporting that you have to have for that. So we have run a network operations center in New Jersey, with the usual like big monitors and people making sure everything works. We I think for really for our health, we one of our first customers was Apple. So we do power every iPhone in the United States, and they're like the most, like the worst, the worst customer for a startup normally to have as your first customer, but it was like so critical for us. They really taught us how to run an extremely high fidelity operation. So any little thing, they jumped all over. Every code release, they checked every piece of it because it's a mission critical life and death piece. And as some of you may have seen, it was something that was fairly prominent for them that Tim Cook announced. It was 1,500 news articles in 48 hours when they announced this partnership. So I think that, that pivot was challenging for us, but it is now a core piece of what we do, and I think we've learned how to do that better.
Before we all leave, will you show us so we know how to use our iPhone to call 911? No, I'm serious. I don't know how to use it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you will help us figure that out today.
It's actually it's embedded in the system, so you just call 911 like you normally would, and it just works. But if you talk to me afterwards, there's some other cool ways that you may not be aware of that you can call from your watch, or just hit the side button and it works. So there's some other stuff too. But yep.
Great. Well, I would love to learn. Want to talk a little bit about, one, your business model and how you make money, and then two, how you raise sort of initial funding and what that looked like. And I know you're a public company. You've raised, you said, $90 million. And Michael, what is your business model now? Who pays you? And second question, how did you raise money? I mean, this is it was probably a daunting task to be building this system. How did you convince people you could do it when it wasn't working, anywhere else?
Yeah, you should think of our company a little bit like we're like a two-sided platform. So on one side of the platform, there's 25,000 different 911 systems that have to interface with, our estimate is about 162,000 different software systems that are running in your police, fire, EMS vehicle. And you can imagine the 911 centers, which have no money and no time, also don't want to install some system unless there's a lot of content coming through. And if you're Apple, Google, Uber, a connected car platform, connected building platform, you don't want to send us data unless we can get it everywhere. And it's this kind of unique kind of chicken and the egg problem. Like we'll be announcing shortly a very large connected vehicle platform that will hopefully allow us to manage most vehicle crashes in the United States. But if you get a car crash in Des Moines, Iowa, or Tulsa, Oklahoma, you got to get a response everywhere, right? And so we really struggled with that. And thankfully, the 911 community, we decided we would give away kind of the core service to 911 and first responders for free. And we thought that it was the only way to achieve scale there. We also thought it was really critical to our mission. Just given how challenged that environment was, we didn't want to add even additional challenges for them. We wanted to try to solve their challenges. And if you looked at it, we saw so much spend by consumers trying to access emergency services. So you may not think of it this way, but like help, I've fallen and can't get up, right? Like, what is that service? That's essentially a call center. So, an aging parent presses a button. You go to a call center somewhere in the United States or worse overseas. The call center calls 911 and verbally speaks information to a 911 operator who types it into a legacy software system, and finally you get dispatch, right? So just that is an example. The help, I fall and can't get up market is one example, is larger than the entirety of the U.S. 911 software market every year. So when we looked at this two-sided platform, it was pretty obvious to us that we wanted to focus on the ingestion side is from a commercial standpoint. So our partners that provide data into our system, for the most part, pay us. We do have a number of nonprofit partnerships there as well. We work with communities that are heavy users of 911 services. We do that for free. So I think we have about 14 million health profiles in our platform today through partnerships with the Medical Alert Foundation or American Heart Association and others. But generally, our customers are companies like Uber, Apple, et cetera.
And just want to talk a little bit about your scale, because it sounds like you were trying to figure it out for a number of years, pivoting, and then one day you just went from 0 to, I think you said 250 million users. What was that turning point? What happened? Was it the partnerships? Was it you figured out the technology?
Yeah, so one of the things, despite the failure of the initial products, we were out talking to 911 centers. So after I was working in venture capital in New York City, and so after I had this incident in Harlem, my co-founder and I had a rule that every week we were going to talk to 20 911 centers. And then my summer of grad school, I borrowed my dad's Prius and I drove 1,500 miles and met with several hundred 911 centers. And then I would just call Nick, our co-founder, who was back at the Harvard Innovation Lab building the tech. So we were gaining a lot of knowledge about the system, even though our products weren't resonating with consumers. But the other thing that the products did work, and it allowed us to get in front of large companies like Apple and Google that were thinking about this problem. So statistically, you were looking at, based off the FCC's analysis, in the range of 3,600 or so iPhone users that were dying every single year when they called 911 and they couldn't be located, which is just shocking because Apple's figured out how to locate us 10 years ago, right? So you're talking 36,000 fatalities in that time window just because we couldn't get that location through. So it was amazing to find people at these very large companies that admittedly had the courage to work with us to do that. I mean, large companies don't work with startups, in my experience, very well. And I think the mission component was really critical to doing that. There was, kind of all sorts of funny stories along the way, but ultimately, I think that's what made it happen. And then we did. The result was when we finally launched, it scaled very quickly. So we ran a pilot with Google in January 2018, and by the end of 2018, we did have about 250 million users in the United States. It's a little hand wavy, but that would make us 3x faster than Facebook from launch to user count.
We'll take it. That's okay. One thing you said is interesting, and I'm sure this is true of 2U. In the social sector in particular, a lot of people create things because they think they know what people need, and they just show up and it's free, and then we wonder why we haven't solved pretty much any problem in the world. It sounds like you did so much customer discovery, or you continue to probably do that, so that you built something for scale because you really understand your customer and their needs. Maybe, Andrew, you could talk to sort of how, one, your products evolved and how you're evolving along the side of the university as their needs change, and how you actually know what their needs are.
So it's a partnership. There's a ton of communication constantly. We are a better company today, no question, because of our universities pushing us to do things better, differently. So we've evolved our services in a variety of ways. For example, GDPR and privacy. That is something that is incredibly complex, critically important, that there are not a lot of universities that have the resources, bandwidth to do those kinds of things the way we have. So we've built in-house capacity. We hired the former chief privacy officer of the Federal Trade Commission to be our first chief privacy officer. So we hire experts who is now sort of a subject matter expert in this particular area for our university partners. So she's going around meeting with deans and faculties to just educate them on what it means to be, for example, GDPR compliant in today's world. Accessibility continues to be just incredibly important that, for example, on our side, our platform is fully accessible for blind and deaf students and any disability that is there that we're tailoring the platform and the content and so forth to any and all audiences. Career services, right, wasn't a thing we started with. Our partners have said we want more support with career services, interview prep, resume reviews, because historically universities have not invested in the way that they need to in their career services on a global scale, right? Because USC teaching had 80 students in Southern California, but now they have students in 70 countries and every state. And so a lot more students, a lot more scale, a lot of things come with that. So it was all about listening. There's no question that, we're not adding services today as a result of the needs of our partners changing.
Sounds like you're solving problems for them or things they don't have the capacity to build. Yeah, want to just jump sideways because I realize, thank you for your watch because it's very clear what time it is to me. And it's hard to look at mine. We only have about 10 minutes till we need to open for Q&A, and I have, of course, not answered any of these questions. So want to talk about people, right? So one of the hardest things, I at some point realized I love starting things. I do not like maintenance. I don't like managing people. I find it incredibly hard. I think I was terrible at it. It's hard to be both a founder and a builder and then a maintainer, and I realize none of you are in maintenance mode yet. You're still building, but can you talk a little bit about people management, both how you do it and also what are the types of people you're hiring for the students in the room who are going to be looking for jobs soon?
So to be clear, we are hiring in all roles. So if you're looking, let's talk. Martin at RapidSOS.com. I would say on the flip side, like no 28-year-old kid should start a company and expect that they're going to have any idea what they're doing. It's been an unbelievable learning experience. I've been really bad at it. Hopefully slightly better now. I used an executive coach, which was super helpful, and have been fortunate to have, Andrew, you talked about this earlier, some of these advisors and hiring experts. I've been fortunate to surround myself with really seasoned veterans in different areas. Sometimes our investors joke that we have the world's largest advisory board. We have 25 or so different advisors that help in various areas, and they're extremely helpful. But from a team standpoint, we've hired, I think last year we averaged, 1.3 people per week. So it was a significant challenge to onboard. How do you incorporate kind of a culture standpoint, and how do you lead those folks? I think candidly, we nearly got to the breaking point when we went through that, and I think it took me a while to be there to where I could really, absorb the feedback. But I think the feedback was very clear that I was not doing a good job as CEO on doing that, and I was mostly out kind of evangelizing what we're doing, trying to raise more money, et cetera. So one of the things we've done is we have the former CEOs of several of the largest public safety software companies that work for us now, and they're awesome. We really have veterans across most functions, but one critical thing, and everyone here I think knows this, but it's easy to get the seasoned exec that's used to 3 assistants, and you really have to get doers. So most of our employees go through a personality assessment when we hire you that tries to measure for that, and it's something that we got from my executive coach. I think it's been very effective, and we actually specify different personalities by the role and function, so that we're trying to kind of match that better. But I think having people that are experienced and having people that are doers were critical. And I think the final part is I transitioned from when you're 5 people and you have to do everything to a world where now we are 100 people, and you need to figure out how you can empower people and get out of the way was challenging for me and still a learning process.
And are you hiring mostly engineers, or do you also want liberal arts college grads who, as a liberal arts college grad, who know how to think or be creative? What does the pool look like? You
were Bowdoin, right?
Yes.
I was Carleton, so awesome. We love liberal arts grads. We have a number of liberal arts grads that work for us. So our team is 100. I'm estimating it's about 60% engineering today. We have a very large public safety team that's out working with 911 centers all day long everywhere, but it's time to really start plugging content and scaling the business. So we're actually hiring for a bunch of operational roles, business development, partnerships, et cetera. So those people skills, I think you get in a liberal arts setting is a great skill set. But we're basically hiring everywhere right now. So
I'm going to send a link to my students. Andrew, so we'll mention again the intern, right? I know you're very proud of that. So 2008, you were an intern. Now you're running a big part of the business. Talk about that sort of growth in terms of your personal leadership, but also how you've managed going from a team of 5 to 4,000 employees. Want to jump quickly to a quick discussion around impact and social impact, and everyone's obsessed with social impact and what that means, and I don't think really people understand how to actually define it. So Michael, you've saved something like 54,000 lives since you've started, not you personally, but the company. So that's obviously one measure, one outcome. What else are you looking at? Because obviously that's not the only metric, right? You've fixed systems, right? So what are you thinking about in terms of that? Like, what data points do you put on your website, et cetera?
I forgot one thing. One of Michael's advisors is my executive coach. And we just found that out yesterday. So it's very, very small world. Anyway.
And we learned a lot more. The wedding ring there is partially responsible for him, and I'm getting married in 3 weeks. I got engaged at this advisor's place. So anyway.
We are not getting married, though.
Oh, no. Getting sad news here. So I think that's a great question, Sarah. Like, how do you think about measuring the different outcomes? And I should clarify, statistically on just the FCC's analysis, about 5,400 lives since we launched last fall. And we do get, one of the things that's extraordinary is we get daily stories from 911 centers. Things like a mother that went into labor early, was home by herself, called 911 and passed out on the phone. When the paramedics arrived, child was still was born but unconscious, and they were able to do CPR on both mother and child, save their lives. A woman that was locked up in the trunk of a car the other day managed to call 911. She was kidnapped. They were able to, pull over the perpetrator and save her life. Just a lot of, you see some of the really, I think, sad parts of America's society. But we think a lot about how many different agencies are using our system, because we think that's a testament to, like, is all the money we're spending on research and development working and changing their operations. We try to measure like a net promoter score for those agencies to assess, are we actually solving their problems? And then obviously we measure a lot throughput through the system. We do measure actually response time savings. We quantify the data going through the system. At one point in time, we had a KPI tracking sheet that was like hundreds of rows long. One of the feedback was that's probably not a good way to measure KPIs, so we're honing that down. So I would say it's multidimensional, exactly as you pointed out, Sarah.
Yeah, and Andrew, I assume internally you're thinking about more universities you're signing up, but I think you're also providing access to people who might not have access to higher education. So what are you looking at in terms of those outcomes and impacts?
Yeah, I would first say I love that you get the stories, by the way, from the centers, because I remind myself and our employees that to stay motivated, you need that, right? It's a lot of work. What we do is hard, and the impact stories, at least I'm sure, fuels you and your team and fuels us. So when you hear stories about, folks who live in rural areas, for example, that are able to get a Georgetown nursing degree or a master's degree in social work or an MBA, but not have to pick up their life, quit their job, move their family to attend a great school, that's the impact. So for us, it's actually how do we ensure that we stay ahead of sort of market trends to be able to offer through our university partners an education for anyone, anywhere, whether it be a degree, a short course for mid-career professionals who are looking to upskill or reskill, a training or coding boot camp, for example, on the ground. And in many ways, I think universities have not been set up digitally to provide an education to anyone, anywhere, right? And that's in part what we are trying to enable through them. But it really is all about access and, more importantly, impact. And if you think about it, think about high quality education anywhere in the world, but being able to have local impact to where you live, right? So social workers, for example, being able to stay local to where you are while receiving, a great education from a school and community and doing that work in a clinic. Those are the things that are most powerful.
Yeah, I'm told I have now 2 minutes left. So just in 1 minute or less, if you could each say sort of where are you going, right? So are you just going to keep building and building and go international? Are you going to figure out how to leverage the technology to solve other problems? Sort of what does growth look like? Maybe where are you in 5 years?
I'd say 3 things we're trying to do. So today we manage about 150 million emergencies in the United States, which means we're only scratching the surface on this challenge globally. There's about 2 billion globally. So we're actively working to get international. If that's something that interests you, let's talk. Secondly is we're trying to dramatically increase the amount of content flowing through the system. So more health data, more real-time telematics, connected building data, et cetera. So we're working on that. And then finally, we are thinking a lot about can we work with agencies to actually start to think about incidents before they occur. So we just announced a new financing round, and it was led by actually a consortium of 50 different utilities. We're starting to think about can we leverage content in our platform to actually predict wildfires before they occur. We're also looking, we've done some white paper work to look at can we predict heart attacks before they occur, et cetera. So can we shift that paradigm from emergency response to one of prediction and prevention?
And on our side, we've made, in the last 2 years, 2 large acquisitions. We bought a company in Cape Town, South Africa that's focused on short courses, again, for mid-career professionals, 6 to 9 weeks in length, whether it be in cryptocurrency or machine learning. And then a company more recently, Trilogy Education, we bought for $750 million just a couple months ago as our second big acquisition. So where we're going is really better understanding the intersection between degree programs, short courses, coding boot camps. How do you embed technical skills training into varying other degrees and educational opportunities? And more importantly, how do we expand access through our universities? So for us, it's not necessarily adding new universities. It's about going deeper with our existing university partners to be able to, offer them a broader suite of services.
Awesome. All right, I think we have 15 minutes for Q&A, and somewhere there's a microphone. She is coming up. We have one here in the front.
Hi, I'm Michael Smolens from .sub, and I have good connections with both of you. We were involved with Peter Norvig and Sebastian Thrun at Udacity before they started. We're in the language enabling business, enabling video to be available in multiple languages, and so they wanted their course before it was launched to be available in lots of languages, and they had 160,000 students. So currently we're doing the same thing. I'd love to talk to you about the fact that there's 7.6 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
And I'd love to work with you to help you enable the courses to be available in the languages that the people speak. And there's it's a very difficult thing to do, but that's what we do as language enabling at scale.
Great.
And
we're launching our first Spanish-speaking MBA next year with Tec Monterrey in Mexico, but that is definitely a growing trend.
And 1 year ago on Mother's Day, I fell, and I was bleeding, and my phone didn't connect, and if there was not a dog barking, I would have been dead. And I was helicoptered out because of, it's exactly the same thing.
To follow up on the growth, my name's Jessica, hi, alumni here. On the growth question, exit strategy, your exit IPO. No venture capitalist is giving you all this money without an exit of some sort. And all I'm thinking about, ooh, Google wants all the world's information. How great would it be if they had this information? But then you're in the business of saving lives, and if Apple buys you or Google buys you, then how do how do the Android phones connect? And so how are you thinking about your exit and where you want to go, and do that considering you really want to do good for the whole world and not just end up under one of these large company umbrellas?
Yeah, it's a question that pops up as you raise venture financing. Totally. Coming from the VC world, I was deliberately did not want to be beholden to those pressures. I didn't get into the full background. Separately, my father had an incident somewhat similar where he couldn't get through to 911 for a variety of reasons. So I had this extraordinary good fortune to go to a great grad program and will, as a result, always have a safety net of a great job somewhere, hopefully. So this was much more about how can we solve that mission. So we were very deliberate when we raised capital to try to diversify the types of investors that we have. So in addition to, we do have some traditional venture capital firms because I think they bring a level of discipline and knowledge about scaling, but we were fortunate to have the managing partners that were starting to think about their legacy and how do we solve big global challenges. So I haven't felt that sort of pressure from them. And then we have a number of fairly influential individuals. So when I was at Harvard Business School, I was this kid from Indiana that had no network at all. So I just Googled the most influential Harvard Business School alumni, and I sent all of them cold emails, and extraordinarily, I had about a 50% response rate from the top 20 list of like presidents and billionaires. So we have, as an example, 6 billionaires that were had some sort of personal connection to the problem. So we did early on have one large technology company that was interested in acquiring us and only using it for their user base, which I think was really unsatisfying for us. So. We're really focused on solving this challenge, and I think if we do that well, like that's what will create value. And so at this point, we don't really actually even talk about it internally other than what are the types of investors that we want to partner with.
Hey, Michael. My name's Akshay at the B School. My question is, you went from energy investing to sort of a very significant pivot in entrepreneurship in a different field. Can you talk about how your investing sort of gave you an edge or sort of any lessons along the way?
Yeah, so I used to work for a energy technology venture capital firm in Manhattan here. Impressive homework. And it is it's an amazing learning experience because you see, I think probably when I was there, we invested in 44 companies or so. I had a chance to kind of be on or observe the board of 8 of them in 4 countries. So you see, for better or worse, how some of these companies come together. So that was an amazing learning experience, I think. But as you pointed out, is a totally different field. But there's actually some similarities. It's mission critical infrastructure. We actually did some nuclear energy deals in that company. The other thing I think is like, unless you've worked in those spheres, it is really opaque. Like it's not, raising venture capital funding. It is, many of you probably have gone through this experience, like it's still like this network driven approach. There's not like, a website you can kind of put your business plan on and raise venture capital funding. There's folks that are trying to solve that challenge, but today it's still very much like, how do you plug into those networks? And it's this like very opaque process that we're seeing play out in the media now. Like, how do you value a company? How do you, what's the right amount of capital to raise? So I do think the VC training was really helpful on that part. I think what it was not helpful for was learning how to build and grow a team. When I founded Rapid SOS, I'd led like an intern, and so that's been, I think, the biggest area of, growth for me and will continue to be so. So definitely prepares you in some areas, but it means you're really weak in others, versus, some of my friends in business school, they were 23, graduated from one of the military academies, and they were dropped into Iraq and leading, a platoon of guys. So, they really know how to lead people. They may not know how to do a cap table, but, in some ways, I think they're way better prepared to be entrepreneurs than I was, but pluses and minuses.
So I'm Kamakshi. I'm with the India-focused Social Impact Venture Fund. And the question's either for you, Michael, you mentioned different kinds of investors, or for anyone in the audience. Both of you have the potential for large scale and rapid growth, which is something that venture capital looks for. What solutions would you suggest? I see a missing gap, at least in India, for companies that cannot grow very rapidly, but that have cash flow features, attractive from a cash flow basis, and also have a clear social impact. This may be a conversation for anyone to come up and share their thoughts with me afterwards, but I was just wondering if you thought about that question at all.
My 2 cents, I would probably say you have way more experience to answer that question than me. We are moving into the India market perhaps right now, so we've at least looked at it a bit. But I think generally this is part of this really complicated dating process that Andrew talked about finding the right sets of investors or partners to match your business profile. And like we've all read in the news, the impact that SoftBank has had on some businesses, and that's a very small type of business, versus we have a number of individual investors that might do dozens of angel deals actually a year, and they might be very happy to be in a investment that isn't going to be a $10 billion company, but it's going to be a steady cash flowing business. And often the folks that are doing that are really interested in multiple ways of impact in measuring scale. So I think it's just perhaps a different set of investors, and it sounds like you operate in that space all day long.
And we're not in India.
What can I learn from the US market?
We have a question back there.
I'm Padma. I'm here all the way from Cairo, Egypt to attend this conference. I worked for an e-commerce startup in Africa, which is now listed on NYSE this year. I was chief product owner, managing the product requirements for this company, and now I want to foray into social entrepreneurship in building a platform for clean energy applications in Africa. All my mentors, former bosses, think it's a crazy and overambitious idea. So this question is for either of you. During your setbacks or, during some of your failures, did you ever think, oh, why did I get into this? Should I have stuck to a 9-to-5 stable job? And during such times, what kept you going?
So I tend to be very much an optimist. I think I've also learned that as a leader, you really need to lead through both having confidence and optimism. No one wants to work for a pessimist. I think for me, just my personality is such that, we had a lot of bumps in the road. I mean, we didn't think we would ever raise funding, right, back in 2008. So it would have been a very, very quick sort of test. But for me, no, never questioned it. It was always a very clear, I'll go back to, there was a very clear focus. There was a very clear articulation of a problem and how we can fix it. And it was, let's get a group of people together that is going to do anything and everything to achieve these goals. You're always going to have bumps in the road, but you think, you need resilience more than anything. You need to surround yourself with people who are optimists, because it's hard. It's not easy, and I think it's very easy to question yourself. But it wasn't that's the advice I think I would give.
Yeah, we should talk quickly afterwards because I have some investors that care about that issue. Many of us have gone through this stuff. I think it is exactly that, I think, which is just you got to really believe in the mission of what you're doing, right? And we had, obviously, infinite challenges like any kind of social enterprise startup, but having that passion that we really cared about, and then to the extent you can, surround yourself with like a group of people, whether it's your team members, advisors, fellow founders, or other people that I think it can keep your mental sanity through the journey. Or in my case, as I mentioned, having an executive coach was amazing. So I think all those things can be helpful. But if it's there'll be a lot of doubters along the way, and I think having the passion to follow that dream is so critical.
Hi, my name is Lee Wack. I work for what's called Chalkbeat, which is an education-focused nonprofit journalism. We're in 7 cities, including New York. And so, and in fact, we're looking for interns. Sarah, I want to get you a link for those who, students here that may be interested, for next summer. But my question is for Sarah and Andrew. Just as someone like myself actually comes from a communications background, a journalism background, and is now doing development and fundraising. And it's funny, when I got hired, I was like, you really think I can do this job? But I'm learning the space, and I just want to learn from you, like, what would be some of your tips, especially toward development within reaching funders who are focused on education?
I can just quickly, so you're raising mostly philanthropic dollars?
Correct.
So, I mean, it's hard to raise money. There are 2 million nonprofits in the United States, but I think the ones that do well know how to sell themselves, right, and are good at marketing, and really synthesizing what they do, and the sort of return on investment, I think, is key. I think having impact measures, being straightforward and honest about what you know and what you don't know. I also think partnerships help. Funders love funding. They don't want to fund in silos, and so the more partners you can have that complement each other, I think the better. But really, it's just sales, and also matching with the right donors. If you go to Ford Foundation and you say we're a perfect fit and you haven't read their guidelines, that really annoys them. So you really need to know what they're looking for. And do that customer discovery, treat them like their clients, and then I think there's a match. Also, people like to fund big ideas. They don't want to fund a little idea, right? So you're in 7 cities, you want to be in 700. I mean, that's what people like to fund, but they need to see that implementation plan. Unfortunately, I think we have one more? No? I see someone anxiously wants to ask a question.
I missed the last one. So, hi, Jonas Dolman, founder of Scarcity Analytics. We aim to translate weather and financial models to help consumers buy storable goods preemptively before weather price spikes, which are expected to become worse with climate change. How important is the physical location of your business in acquiring venture capital? All my people live in my hometown of Halifax, Nova Scotia. You mentioned you're in Midtown, and I imagine New York is much greater in terms of getting capital. Do you need to be where the money is, or should you try to locate where your people are? And does that have any impact on getting your early venture capital?
Great question. I probably would say that I don't have a super informed view on that. I mean, obviously, if you look at the charts, there's 3 large bubbles of venture capital dollars. They flow into Silicon Valley, they flow into Boston, they flow into New York City. There's obviously folks, like the Rise Fund, that are deliberately only funding startups in other parts of the United States, with Steve Case. So, there's certainly pools of capital everywhere. I working in VC previously. We only, of our 50, 60 companies, we only had 2 or 3 that were like in Silicon Valley, and 1 that was in New York City. So I think venture capitalists are incentivized to invest in good companies wherever they are. But it is easier to go to a networking event next door, and it's easier because people are always coming through New York. So it's probably somewhere in between. This may not be helpful at all.
All right.
Terrible way to end.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming. Michael and Andrew,
Thank you.
You're amazing. Thank you.